So, everyone, this is Steve Horn. Steve Horn and I have worked together in different real estate companies for several years. I've admired the work that he and his wife Lisa have done. The finishes that they do on their houses, whether it's a rehab or it's just a listing that they're sprucing up, is top notch. I mean, it is every detail is done well. And then Steve started doing something that was actually very amazing that no other agent that I've ever worked with did. He would take other real estate agents on house tours. House would be up for sale. He'd pick a house that either had a lot of work to do or not a lot of work to do, and he would walk us through and talk about the things that we should look for in building inspections and just kind of red flags. And it was so nice to have that because for the most part, we're not allowed to attend our building inspections. I mean, you can attend them, but you can't really talk because you can't play inspector. So to have an opportunity to be able to ask an inspector or a person who knows a lot about buildings, the questions that you would like to ask the inspector, it really helps me be able to serve my buyers and sellers better. Tell us a little bit about your background, Steve. How long have you been in real estate?
So I've been an agent since 2011. It's hard to believe, 14 years. Um, and I started at Remax. Just had a friend that was an agent and joined the office she was in. I was in Remax Gold for about, seems like it was 6 or 7, 5 or 6 years anyway. And then we moved out towards West County and realized that we wanted somebody that was closer to our area, especially as we were trying to get agents through open houses, and we were trying to do agent open houses. Ran across Mark King and got involved with Keller Williams, and we were there for probably 5 or 6 years too. And then we became attached. I've always been fond of Michael Nettemeyer, and a couple of years ago just said, "Hey, I want to try doing something different." And we joined up with Michael probably 2.5 years ago. Real estate wise, I got my license. I was actually a custom home builder at the time I got it. I just thought it'd be another tool I could use if I had somebody who wanted to buy a lot, if I had somebody who needed to. I had ended up with clients who were selling houses so they could build. So it was a way to make a little bit of extra money,
And a natural
and
fit.
and it was, yeah. So my background, I was out of college. I was a residential carpenter, and then I came to St. Louis and worked as a commercial carpenter, and worked in the commercial field for probably about 14 years. And then 2003 started my own custom home building business, thinking I knew what was going to happen and having no idea what it was going to be like. But did that for 15 years. Finished up working with some investors, helping them turn some higher end homes around the town and country area and Chesterfield. Uh, that started to wear on me a little bit just because they were out of town investors. So we were kind of like a landlord. So I had 2 or 3 pools I was caring for and sprinkler
Ah,
systems. And if a basement got wet, or, I was having to tend to those houses as well. And so then we decided to go just straight real estate. And then Lisa and I did that for 6 or 7 years. Like I said, I just ventured off a little bit into the construction field for about 8 months, but I'm back working with my daughter Kayla and Lisa. Lisa really does a lot of the design and staging and deals with the photographers and those kinds of things, making things pretty. And I help on the kind of more on the business end, as well as anything with inspections and construction and so forth. And we're trying to pass that along to Kayla. We rebranded so that if in 6 or 7 years we're kind of ready to be done, we're not still carrying our name on it, but it's something that she can continue on with. So
it's a great legacy to have.
it
Definitely.
is, yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I've known a lot of multi-generational real estate families, and there's so much knowledge and experience and uh, skills that you pass on the next generation. It's
Hmm.
a really cool thing to see. My dad was in
Yeah.
steel manufacturing. That's not my game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I realize how many little things I've picked up over all of these years, and I have several daughters that are touching in either construction or real estate. I have two daughters, or actually three. That I have one that works in multifamily, and I have two that work for a construction company that's based out of Kansas City. One of them lives in Orlando, and she works for that branch, and one works in Kansas City. So it's been fun. We actually dug up some pictures of me as a carpenter working on the Edward Jones Dome
Oh, wow.
and sent that in. They did a little spotlight on her, and it was really interesting to look back at that. I was 28 years old, and I welded up a whole bunch of trusses that they used on a portion of that building, and it was I don't even know who took the pictures. My wife found a whole stack of them, and I just thought it was really neat. So it's neat to
That's
see that
amazing.
continue on, and some interest in it. It's a very interesting field to be a part of.
Yeah, yeah. It's always fascinated me. I've been doing this since 2001, and my background, I was a psychotherapist, and my minor was law, and so real
Oh,
estate's a perfect fit.
yeah, right. Sounds like a Mark King line, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
working with crazy people. Yeah.
It really does. Okay, so you have obviously got a wealth of knowledge and experience on looking for properties, and you have obviously flipped properties in the past and held them too. I don't know how long, but you've had to hold them for a few months, so you kind of understand what the process is of holding, and the
Hmm.
expenses and everything. When you go into a property, is there a specific thing that you go for first? Is it like the foundation? Is it the electrical? Is it plumbing? Or is it what?
I like to go into the basement. I can learn a lot from walking in the basement. If I go to an electrical panel and it just is a mess, and I open it up, and you've got a pretty good idea that a lot of stuff's been done. If you see a lot of open junction boxes, somebody's been doing a lot of work themselves. You could pretty much eye plumbing and see whether it's homeowner or if it's been done by a professional. My concern is usually when a homeowner has gotten in and started on things. How is that? I obviously am looking for cracks in foundations. Those tell a story. Some of them mean nothing. Concrete's always going to crack, but if they, if you're seeing walls moving or leaning, then from there I'm going to the outside. If I'm looking at foundation, then I'm going to the outside and I'm seeing what the ground does. Is the ground sloping towards it? Are we dealing with water? Are there trees close by? Um, am I on a cul-de-sac? If you're familiar with street creep, if you're on a cul-de-sac or a turn, as you keep going around and around and around, you can push on a driveway, and you can force foundations to do some things as well. So I try and see if it's something that's fixable. I'm buying a house now that's got some cracks. They're rebar cracks. If you all are familiar with that, a lot of times in a foundation, you'll have maybe two rebar at eyeball height and maybe two down at your knees that they run through. And if they haven't secured them when they pour that concrete, those rebar can float towards the outside of the form. And then you get even, temperature movement over time. You can get just a nice even crack that goes all the way across. That's not going to concern me as much as some other cracks. So I learn a lot from a basement. Structural steel, what's the mechanical system look like? Are there sumps? We looked at a house the other day. The drain line's going out halfway up the wall. So now I know that the sewer was too high for them to take it out the basement floor. And now I know that everything that's draining in the basement has to get pumped up to that line. We went and looked at a house. Sewer line was coming halfway up the wall, and there was a laundry and a toilet in the basement. And I don't know how that water was getting out. But if I can't answer those questions, so I can learn a lot from a basement real quick. And then I'll go up through, then from there, if I see cracks and settling, then I might progress up through the house to see if I'm seeing stuff, cracks over doorways. I close doors. Are they square? Are they, has somebody been working on them to make them close? You know, those kinds of things.
When you're
To
talking
see if
about
there's been
cracks, I mean, there
new.
are a lot of different kinds of cracks, and you were mentioning cracks at the doors, and those are pretty typical, not necessarily structural, because that's the weakest point. And horizontal cracks, I've always heard, are the worst because it means the foundation is shifting. And then anything bigger
Mhm,
than a dime is concerning. Is that
mhm.
kind of pretty much what you would
Yeah, the
say?
cracks that scare me the most are the ones that start in the corners and go up towards the middle of the wall, and that usually shows that the wall is pushing in.
Okay.
And so I'm watching an angle crack like that. If it's just straight horizontal, I'm not as concerned, but I'm going to check and see, you know, why I think it's that way. You'll get a lot of verticals that come underneath windows and so forth, and small ones. Yeah, you're looking for a wide crack. You're also looking at if it's offset. Is one side higher than the other? If you rub your hand across, is it smooth, or does it catch? And is one side pushing and the other one isn't? And then obviously you're looking to see, is there water coming out? If there's moisture coming out of it, then that can be an issue as well. And a lot of things are fixable, but it's how much do you want to do? It's hard to find a foundation in St. Louis that doesn't have a crack in it.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with cracks in the house that we're buying now over in Ellisville, and but I know what I'm up against. And I had an engineer come look at it with me. I still am always wary. They remind us that we're not the expert. As much as I know, I still will bring an engineer in and have him double check me and make sure. I think
Wise.
that's always wise to do.
And you're a seasoned builder, so all of us take heed.
Well, an engineer has seen 2,000 foundations, and he's going to let you know if something makes him feel nervous, you know. And I'll ask him, "Would you buy this house?" If he has no issue with it, then I feel pretty confident.
And if it's okay, can I just add one thing that you said to me about the Ellisville house?
Sure.
Was that you said, I want somebody that doesn't have the eyes of this is in my daughter's backyard and I'm going to be, subjective eyes of I really want to live here. I want somebody that's just going to look at it. Not that you're the most educated, but everybody, when they have an emotional attachment to it, can oversee a few things.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a really tough thing to do, and I keep preaching that never get emotionally attached to a house. You don't make good logical decisions when you're an emotional mind. And it's hard when you love architecture. I absolutely am fascinated by architecture and all the diverse architecture that we have here. And I've seen myself many times going, I want this, and then look at the numbers and go, oh, but I can make it. It never works. Never.
Hmm. You got to buy it right. And I also do remind people about time. If you're looking at a foundation and it's 60 years old and it's moved a half an inch in 60 years, you're probably okay. If you're looking at a brand new house and it's moved an inch and a half in 6 years, then obviously you've got an issue. But time will also tell you some things
Good
for
point.
sure.
And then the cracks in the floor, cracks in the garage, not necessarily foundation because that's poured separately and it's probably a moisture problem, but not
Yeah,
necessarily
and you can have
foundation.
some. I mean, you can have some pretty serious cracks in a floor, and it'll tell you you've got some plastic soil underneath there, and you've got some heaving. It's worth paying heed to that. But my guarantee when I was building houses was the concrete will crack, and you can keep both halves. It's just going to happen. And in fact, in I don't know exactly when newer homes started it, but cracks are planned. I know when we talked about one of our housing tours, but zip strips. I mean, there's planned cracks through the columns, usually off of a corner. And I know there's a bunch of people too that will give you issue about the shrinkage around the foundation, right at the wall, and say, well, that's a problem. It's not. There's moisture in it when you pour it, and when it's done, it shrinks and it pulls back, and that floor is not holding up the house.
Yeah.
I do tell that
Correct.
story quite a bit. I don't know if you were on that. We finished at a house that Benton Homes was doing there on the corner, We walked across the street, and they had framed the house up, and everyone was looking down in the basement, if you remember, and it was gravel. And they kept looking at me and looking back down, and they were like, "How is the house staying up?" And you can see the footings and the pads for the columns and everything else. And I said, at best, that that floor holds the walls apart, and it gives you something to walk on. But that is not what's holding the house up. And that was
Right.
a good visual for those agents.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when you think about it, if you have no construction background, you think, well, you have to put the base to put the sides, and that's not true at all. You put the
Mm-hmm.
foundation and build the sides, and then pour the base later,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah. And by
Okay,
the way, I
so
have agents all the time who will FaceTime me and say, "What do you think about this?" I'm open to that. So
I appreciate that,
if
and
somebody's got a
in all
question.
sincerity, he always gets back to you. I guarantee you, he will. Okay, so we look at the foundation, we go inside, and then we go outside. And you talked about the electrical system, and how do you feel about knob and tube? If it's still there and not active, how do you know?
So knob and tube still is to code. The problem with knob and tube is how people add on to it, and they'll tie in a new outlet or a new switch, and they don't do it correctly, and that's where you really have issue. I actually restored a house in Webster that it got hit by a tree, and we put knob and tube back in, and we put it in correctly, and it was fine. They didn't want to change it.
Interesting.
I think if I was going to go ahead and renovate a house, if I could get rid of it and it was easy enough, I would go ahead and pull it out, because a lot of times it's been added on incorrectly, and you've got a fire hazard behind a wall, for sure.
Yeah, because I know it's an insurance issue. Some insurance companies will say they're not going to insure if it has active or live knob and tube,
Yeah, some
especially
insurance companies are
fourplexes.
pushing back on aluminum wiring now too, though.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
interesting. And then there are some things like Federal Pacific boxes. As soon as I see that, I automatically know that's got to be replaced. Are there
Hmm.
other boxes that are old and that you would say, nah, don't?
There's one on the house we're buying, and it's a general something, National General, I think, or something like
I
that.
think I have heard that.
I have an electrician, and I just call him and I say, "What do you think?" And when I sent him this one, he said, "You need to replace it. It has to do with breakers that don't always trip when there's a problem. And then what you do is you end up with a line that gets overloaded, and then you can have fire problems." And after working in the restoration industry for 8 months, I've seen a lot of fires from electrical. Even a newer panel that I see in there, I'll open the door and see if it's got an inspection sticker on it, because you really want to know if it was done by an electrician or maybe somebody did it themselves. But I always feel better if St. Louis County or the municipality has signed off on it, then I feel a whole lot better about it too.
Yeah, definitely. And then the plumbing, you said that you pay attention to the plumbing. Now it's easy to see if it's brand new plumbing because everybody uses PEX,
Hmm.
but they don't always. This house that we bought here in Brentwood, it had um, lead pipes. We had to get the
Mm.
municipality made us get rid of that. And then the ones that
Hmm.
they let us keep had asbestos wrap on it. And so we had to go back
Yeah,
and do that.
yeah, yeah. Asbestos is obviously something not to play around with. It's okay if it's just sitting there, but once it gets in the air, you can have an issue. I'll just see a lot of times, even if it's PVC, I'll see somebody who got really creative and glued about 19 different, adapters together to try and get something. You usually you can look at it and see whether it looks clean and smooth and somebody did it professionally. But if it's a hodgepodge of fittings and so forth, then I really question that. And if you're buying a house, you can just allow for the removal or replacement of that. The house we're buying has cast iron. We will either line it, which we ended up doing at the house we're in now, or we'll replace it, one or the other. And both are viable options, but I don't want anything moving forward that isn't PVC. And if you're not familiar with lining, it's pretty spectacular. Have you seen that?
No, I was just going to ask you about that. I've seen sewer pipes lined many times, but I've not
Mhm.
seen indoor plumbing lined.
So this is this is the cast iron that our drain lines in our house, and we had old flaking inside, and we were getting a lot of soft clogs. So it's kind of like a neoprene sock, and they soak it in this substance. If any of you have had a filling recently where it was a white filling and then they used UV light to harden it, the same process. So they pump this sock, it's in darkness, they pump it all down inside, they use air to expand it inside the pipe, and then they pull UV light through and it cures as it's coming through, and it hardens, and it looks like schedule 40 PVC when it's all done. And we had everything underneath our floors done in our current house, and we're going to, in a couple places where it's easier to do that than it is to tear it up, we're going to do that at the new house as well. And it's not cheap, but it isn't cheap to tear up floors either. So
No. We've got a question here. Go ahead, Quan.
Hi, Steve. So all the thing that you point out, would that pick up by the home inspectors?
I think a home inspector is going to catch a lot. Yes. They're going to obviously open up the panel. They're going to see what's there. They're going to note if it's bad. They're going to point out some things with foundations, cracks. They may not get real in depth. They may just suggest that you get an expert in to take a look at it. And I like getting an engineer in rather than getting a foundation company in, because the foundation company is trying to sell something. The engineer is just trying to do a separate view of it. So a lot of times an engineer for $300 will come and take a look at something. And I think that's well worth it. And they're going to catch a lot of it. I just try and figure out sometimes on an investment, you're just trying to figure out if you like it and to what degree. Can I cure it? In our situation, we've determined that a lot of our issue is just where water is standing, and we're gonna move that away. I mean, he can tell me he's not concerned about the foundation, but I've still got to come up with a solution for a few things.
Yeah, I'm brand new to this, so I would not know anything.
Well, you're welcome to give me a call anytime. I get several FaceTime calls. I get Joe Geary will call me every once in a while and show me a foundation and ask me about it. But sometimes, you're looking at 5 or 6 houses with a buyer, and you're trying to determine which one you're going to make an offer on. And so you're trying to guide them on making a good decision. You're not going to necessarily pay an inspector to look at all 5 or 6 of those. So you're trying to, as best you can, give them some guidance, help them narrow down their decisions so that they can pick a house. And then obviously they've got inspection options that sometimes, we've seen a lot of contracts in the last couple of years come through without inspections, and that always makes me nervous.
Yeah, I say, unless you plan on replacing everything, do an inspection.
Sure.
Thanks for offer.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the electrical, the plumbing. You say that you open doors and windows and things like that. Obviously, it's to make them work, but it's also to see if the floor is level. What does that tell you? Because in St. Louis, you see a lot of wonky floors.
You do see a lot of wonky floors. The engineer that I use actually set a laser down on the ground, and we took a look at the floors in the house that we're purchasing, and we found some minor differences, but it wasn't anything. The house is there again. A house is 60 years old, and if it's moved 3/8 of an inch in 60 years, I'm not going to get too concerned about it. A lot of houses have got some sort of movement, but that's a great way to do it. When I close the door, I'm looking at the gaps all the way around. Is it square? Walk down a hall. I was in a house the other day with Lisa, and as I'm walking down the hall, I'm looking at the door frame, and I can see 3/4 of a drop anyway. And then as I walk towards where that drop is, I can feel the floor going down. And so then of course I go down in the basement. I'm trying to see what's underneath that. Is something sagging? Is there something that should be supported? A lot of old houses didn't have the same support that we see in newer houses. And so trying to figure out what that is. Sometimes you'll feel a sag in a kitchen. Somebody put a big heavy island in the middle of the kitchen and the floor joist didn't get doubled up or something, and you see some drop in the floor. You're just trying to figure out what's bad and what's not. I have a friend bought a house in De Pere, and it's a ranch with a bunch of different levels, and we've determined over the year that the engineer didn't really know what he was doing, and there's a lot of points that were unsupported, and we actually put steel back in that house and added structure in quite a few different places where there was no direct support, and he just couldn't figure out why floors kept dropping a little bit at a time. So there are mistakes made for sure.
Absolutely. What else? You could say water, electrical, cracks, floors.
HVAC system. I mean, I'd be looking at the age of that. Is it, sometimes the house we're buying, the system's 20 years old. I think we'll get 4 or 5 more years out of it. I look to see if it's been maintained. The house we've got, it's been maintained for the last 15 years. There's records of a good contractor coming through. It's quality equipment. I feel pretty good about that. And it's a small house, so I'm not dealing with a huge expense, even if I'm off by a couple of years. But I'll look for that. I'm looking at windows. If you got original aluminum windows, at some point that's going to have to get taken care of. Trying to think of what else. I mean, you could, yeah. Were you on the house that we did in Chesterfield where we had like fractured brick? And did you go on that first one that Kevin did?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking for, cracks stair step cracks. A fractured brick is where it breaks right in the middle, and that shows a lot of movement with the foundation as opposed to following the line of the
least resistance.
the joint. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll check and see. So sometimes you'll see brick and it's hanging over the foundation. Usually it's supposed to be flush, but you'll see brick that might be hanging 1.5 inches over, which means the wall is probably pushed in and that brick is hanging out. What kind of issues do you have with that? I'm just looking for, I was raised by an architect, and he walked around looking at ceilings. I'll go to the corner of a wall, and I'll try and line that up with the opening of a door and see if it's plumb. I just am always citing stuff, and I'm amazed at how I can walk in a house and I just know something's not right. My eye is catching things subconsciously even, and I can just feel that it's not right. You can feel floors moving, and you've got to decide if it's something you're going to flip. Can you fix it, or is this something everybody else is going to notice and you're going to have a hard time selling? Those are the kinds of things you just got to watch out for.
Yeah. Are you concerned when you walk in a house and it has squeaky floors? I'm sure it depends on the age, but that doesn't necessarily mean water damage or bad foundation. Can you
Right.
fix? Yeah.
So the house we're buying has 1x12s as the subfloor, and then they did a 1/4 inch underlayment over the top of that, and then they did carpet. We're going to actually go back with some sort of a laminate or a solid surface on top. And the advice that I've received said just go over the top of the underlayment that's on top. But if you get a wood floor that's put over an old subfloor that's not plywood, then I think it's more prone to squeaks. There are solutions for that. You're also just gonna, floors after overuse are gonna end up with a sag or a little bit of movement or a nail that lets loose or something like that. It a lot of times it'll be in a doorway or a path where somebody walks a whole lot. I'm not a lightweight guy, so I can work on floors over. We've been in a house 12 years. I can create a few squeaks over my time, but trying to figure out the difference between a structural problem and maybe just an application of the floor, I think is worthwhile. And I always take the advice. I as a builder, I always did this. I always talk to my subcontractors and ask them the best solution. So if I was having circulation issues or hot spots, I would talk to my HVAC contractor and say, what's a good solution for this? If I'm having, before I put floors down in this house we're buying, I'm going to ask somebody what's the best solution to make sure I don't end up with squeaks. Is going over the top of this underlayment the best solution? Do I go back down to the subfloor? Do I put tar paper down to help separate that? Or do I put, there's a lot of layered material that you can put between floors that'll help with squeaks as well. You can do floating floors that don't have, any of that. So I think it's always wise to talk to a flooring expert if you're doing that. When that's all somebody does. I was a commercial flooring contractor for 2.5 years. I worked for one as an estimator and a project manager and learned a tremendous amount about the right way and the wrong way. And I have a lot of respect for people that when they just do one thing,
Good point.
trust their wisdom. Yeah, it's good to bring experts in.
Good point. Good point. Trying to think of more things that I look for when I go into a house. Obviously, the windows, the doors, everything that we mentioned, HVAC system.
Smells.
And go ahead. Huh?
I think smells is important.
Yeah.
Do you? I
It's a
mean,
musty.
do you musty, or do you smell cats, or do you smell dogs? Or I went in a house the other day and the homeowner, I said, you have cats? And she said, yes. I said, I can smell them. She said, oh, cats don't smell. I said, well, I smelled them when I
Immune
came
to
in. And she had, yeah, they can get to a point where they don't smell them anymore. But that can be a big deal. They spray the walls, they spray the floor. You can have to go through and do some major work. The house that we're buying 10 years ago, the lady was a smoker and she's painted it since then. And we will be repainting again. I don't really smell much of it, but that can be a big difference. And so getting carpets out and old furniture and blinds that are fabric and those kinds of things that have a lot of those smells, can really help. But dogs will tear up wood floors, and so you just got to watch. I know the house that Kayla has, we found some stains, and the flooring contractor was able to get rid of those, but where dogs had hit a rug or something and then it just sat. So I think it's important to see what's
The previous
been used in it.
homeowners, not
Right.
Yeah.
The previous
I
homeowner,
get
right. With
and
the house that she's in, though, there were some dark stains and they were able to come up with a solution to get rid of it. But you're kind of always watching for that.
Yeah. And when you brought up the smells and getting it out, it reminded me vents too. Having the vents cleaned and
Hmm.
making sure that they're serviceable. We had to have the vents cleaned in this house because I don't think they ever had. And they had always had long-haired dogs and cats.
Hmm.
It was
Oh yeah, I did work on a house
amazing.
and opened up some vents for somebody, and the construction workers had there was packs of cigarettes and cans and all kinds of things that were back in there. And when I used to build a custom home, we were meticulous before we even drywalled, how much we vacuumed everything and then sealed off all of those areas so none of it would get trash in it. But that's a great idea. Having the ductwork clean can make a big difference.
Yeah, very big
I
difference.
think checking out fireplaces is important. You know, you get old chimneys that have cracks inside, and that can be a significant expense if you want to get something going again, or if you have to put a liner in if you're just going to turn a wood burning into a gas fireplace. I'm always trying to figure out how can I make that happen. If somebody wanted a gas stove, can I get that to the kitchen? Can I get that to the fireplace? Where is access for things like that as well?
Yeah, and with the fireplace, then you've got the flashing on the chimney cap, all of those things that you don't think about it, but every one of those things adds up. Nothing's inexpensive anymore.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And people want things perfect. And so you've got to try and get them as close to that as you can, because they'll kind of pick you apart. Some people don't pay much attention to things, but I see a lot of inspection reports that are almost like punch lists for construction. You know, people are worried about chips and paint and stuff. That's not really what an inspection is for, but they can end up that way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Any questions from the people in the, oh, Linda, go ahead. Linda Barker. She's got her
See a
hand
hand
up.
up.
So I don't know that she has her microphone on. She might have stepped away.
Can you hear me? No, we can't,
Oh,
Linda.
can you hear me? No, we can't hear you. You are on mute.
Well, I'll ask you a question. Are the people in this group, are you all buying and selling real estate? Are you considering buying investment properties? Is that more what this is geared towards? Is that right, Jill? More towards
Yes, so
investment properties?
yes, investment property, whether it's flip or it's hold, any combination. A lot of these folks are in our investment group. So we
Okay.
do group projects and we flip them together. We buy the property and then they contribute the money, and we have these meetings about it. So, and
Great.
trying to bring things to light that you wouldn't necessarily think of as a new time investor. You wouldn't necessarily think of, but tools to put in their tool chest. Okay, so her question is, oh, sorry. Her
Yeah, I
question
was just
is,
going to say, it looked like she typed it.
yeah, what cracks do you consider a concern?
So I mentioned cracks. If you have cracks that start, you can look at my screen here even, if you got them in the corner and they come up in the middle, that's a sign that the wall is pushing in the middle. So those are always something that I'm going to look at. Anything that gets wide, say large, you were saying wider than a dime width, maybe a nickel's width, somewhere in there. I want to at least understand where it's coming from. Anything that has leakage, I'm gonna be concerned about that. If it's got a big offset, so if you rub your hand across it and you're catching, when you run one way or the other, you catch an edge. So you know that those surfaces are different depths. That would concern me that something's pushing in. And then when I get to that point, it doesn't mean that because a wall has moved some, you can't buy the house. You just want to know what solutions are for it. and then you want to know what's causing it. So many times if there's a wall that's pushing in, there's something on the outside causing that problem. It may be a hillside that comes down to it. In the case of the house we're buying, they have big, deep flower beds with retaining walls around them. And every time it rains, they're like a swimming pool, and all that water comes in, and then it's basically just hydrostatic pressure. It's pushing underneath, but it's pushed in a little bit on the wall over time. It has I put a level on it, and it's plumb. But you're trying to figure out what is causing that. I also talked about street creep, and that can be either where you're coming down a street and people are turning in front of maybe the driveway, and over time the pressure from those cars will and trash trucks and everything else, fire trucks will push on that. And I've seen where the driveway hits up against the foundation wall, and then it wants to actually move some of that. So those are cracks that I want to, if I see something that's concerning me, I definitely want to have an engineer look at it. It's definitely worth the $300 to have somebody do that and tell you whether it's what it is, and then and get an idea of what it'll cost to fix it. There's a lot of good solutions for that. I actually, Jill, I talked to Michael, but I think I may run back through that class that I did. I had a 3-part class, 3 50-minute sessions. It was footings and foundations, framing, and I think it was framing and mechanical systems, and then finishes and roofs, and a lot of good visuals in there that would help people understand basically how houses are built and what's going into it. So I would be glad to run through those again. I think that could be helpful for some folks as well.
I think so too. Yeah, those are great classes. Very good classes. Any more questions?
Linda's taking a lot of notes. You have any questions, Linda?
Today's Linda's birthday. Happy birthday, Linda.
Happy birthday, Linda.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah,
Happy
well, I'm
birthday.
multitasking, so I'm taking notes on things you're talking about, and I'm taking notes on other things too.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, I will let you go. I so appreciate it, Steve. As always, it's such a pleasure to talk to you and meet with you. And Kayla, good luck keeping up with them, as you know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. As you can tell, I'm very fortunate to learn from him, and he's the best of the best. And thank you for taking the time to ask him, because he's smart, the best, just full of so much knowledge. This was just, and he's so willing to share it with everyone. So please, when he says, call me anytime, he truly means that. And he wants the success of everyone. And so just please take that at face value, because he truly means it.
I agree.
Sure.
I agree 100%.
I do hang my phone up in the kitchen at 7 o'clock at night, so
Wise man.
I have my limits. All right. Well, thanks for inviting me, Jill.
Yes,
And I'm
thank
sure I'll be
you.
talking with you soon. I'm going to catch up with Kevin, and we'll connect. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you all very much. You have a great evening.
Thank you,
you.
Jill.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.